Our next presentation is entitled, Is Your CEO Fit for Cyber? And we're really happy to welcome him his second time here at the CeBIT Global Conferences. Please give a warm round of applause to the CEO of RUAG Defense, Mr. Markus Zoller.
Thank you very much. Is your CEO fit for cyber defense? That's a crucial question to be asked under the fact that cybersecurity is the challenge under terms of industrial and digital transformation and Industry 4.0. However, when we look into reality, there are many large corporate groups who are extremely strong in cybersecurity and have highest attention. But on the other hand, there is a majority of corporations where cybersecurity is in fact not on the top agenda of the CEOs. People are still running around with USB sticks, mobile devices, or interfering with the systems. There's an increasing reliance on service providers. And when we're looking on the CEOs, the question is, why is it not on top of their agenda? Might it be because they do feel uncomfortable with cybersecurity? Might it be that they don't have the right person to delegate to? Might it be that they do not have the gut feeling which is necessary to judge cybersecurity risks and also cybersecurity response? Because in normal business, they have this gut feeling. Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk about that. And what's key, in fact, is to get an organization, a management team, into the cybersecurity mode. Because it's not so easy to get from the I need to do something to the doing. It's not so easy to organize and manage cybersecurity, and it's not so easy finally to accept that I have to do something and I have to invest into cybersecurity. Many corporations start with cybersecurity programs, but then somewhen they stick, even they return back and they miss an opportunity, and finally they risk to fail if a cyber incident happens. And in my opinion, there are 3 steps to get into cybersecurity mode. It's to identify, it's to understand, and then to accept that there is a need for cybersecurity. Let me go through these steps further in details. Identification. There's 2 ways to identify a need for cybersecurity. So one way is the continuous way. We have numbers of media reports, of conferences, of roundtables. In the media on a daily basis, you read about cyber incidents. Just recently, the first ransomware was identified for the Macintosh world, or we had the Federal Reserve Bank of Bangladesh, who almost left or lost $1 billion due to a cyber fraud. At the end, it was only $80 million because it was discovered. I just recently was last week at the cybersecurity roundtable of the US Embassy in Switzerland. Here in CeBIT, cybersecurity is a key subject. And for example, the Verizon breach report, which is published on an annual basis, are these things which give awareness that cybersecurity is important. Then certainly we have our IT strategies in the organization, in the company. We have IT security reporting. So for example, we report the number of patches per year. We report the number of cyber incidents, the number of cyber attacks which were defunded, or we report the mean time between an incident, a vulnerability, and the mitigation measure which was undertaken. And the chief security information officers take care for cybersecurity, and certainly the CIO reports about cybersecurity in a management team or in the executive board. There's 4 more external requirements which increase the awareness for cybersecurity. On the one hand, there are cybersecurity bodies who assess the cybersecurity situation of different players. There is even a tendency that there will be ranking with respect of cybersecurity fitness, and customers ask about the cybersecurity dispositive and fitness of a supplier. And finally, what's key is the gut feeling I have as a CEO. When I have the feeling that something might be wrong, that there is a need for action, when I feel that my people don't understand enough about cybersecurity, or when they tell me everything is under control, that's suspicious, and then it's a gut feeling which triggers identification and pushes me into the next step about understanding. And the other way forward is off-on. So, for example, when a company or a country is confronted with the situation about new regulations, then immediately I have to think about my cybersecurity fitness and need to undertake something. So, for example, in Israel, in the financial sector, people who work and managers who work in the IT environment need to be certified for cybersecurity capabilities. Or when we take the IT security law in Germany, which was applied now in relation to operators of critical infrastructure, that immediately puts them into this situation that they have to do something. Certainly when a customer or a partner organization is confronted with a cyber incident that alerts, I as a supplier or I as a partner ask myself, could I be infected as well? Is it still safe to work with this player? Or do I have to completely cut business relation? And certainly what's really bringing an organization into cybersecurity mode is being confronted with an own cyber incident. We just heard yesterday that in Switzerland, a number of online retailers had been attacked by DDoS attacks. So the DDoS attacks, in fact, have overloaded the web pages of these online retailers. So the regular customers couldn't attack or address the web pages anymore, so not the shops anymore, resulting in huge losses. That certainly brings an organization immediately into the understanding that there is a need to do something in cybersecurity. But such an incident is just the tip of an iceberg. What comes up next is to understand what's happening. And usually when I'm confronted with a crisis, then what's happening quite often at the very beginning is operational hectic. The CEO becomes very active, daily reporting on the status, a lot of consultants taking actions, communication ban, and many people involved. Usually that's not very sustainable and not very effective. It's even counterproductive because the hackers will realize that we have realized being confronted, and they even get motivated to attack furthermore. Then certainly, next thing to do in the understanding is to use the own IT organization with the CIO, with the CISO, having an assessment on the situation, whether on a regular basis, when I came from the left-hand side, or on an extraordinary basis to do an assessment when having been confronted with a cyber incident. They are coming up with action plans. These action plans are going to be discussed in the management team, and that helps understanding about cybersecurity. But what's also important is for myself as a CEO to go into a dialogue with the experts to understand cybersecurity. If I talk with the experts and ask them to explain me in simple words what has happened, that helps. Challenge the nerds to bring it on the point, and work out, by digging into the details, my own story about it. I'm personally a mechanical engineer and not at all a cyber expert, but I digged into it, and now I speak to you about cybersecurity, and that's what the CEO needs to do also in daily business. Then certainly what can also help in this process of understanding is to do cybersecurity assessments. On the one hand, really assessing the IT systems, the processes, and reflect that to common standards. That's ISO 27001, but that's also the levels of crisis security readiness level, or other standards which are available in the market. But what's also very helpful in understanding the real status a company is in is doing cyber attack simulation, attacking the system, attacking the people, and that under a controlled environment. We have, for example, done that for a financial organization in Germany, and it took us approximately half a day, and we had all the data and all the passwords. And that certainly helps understanding that there is really a need to do something. And then what's also important and can help is so-called risk vulnerability and business impact analysis. This doesn't put the IT into the center, but the business. So a company is looking on business risks, is mirroring these business risks on IT risks, and comes up then with a weighted assessment of the grade of vulnerability and can do a proper prioritization. And certainly when business risks are in the center, then it's more and more also a CEO issue and an executive management issue. And finally, what's also important as part of the understanding is that I start to think about what are alternatives, options for cybersecurity strategies, for concepts, and for solutions. Because when I start thinking about what can I do, then I even realize that perhaps the situation is even far worse, or I realize because I have answers on the table, okay, it's solvable, and a panic at the very beginning perhaps relativates. So that's the understanding section. And you see there's quite a lot of points here in this understanding section, and going through that consequently is already a challenge for a company, but it helps. But now the really hardest point in it is accepting. Accepting for myself as a CEO, as a CIO, as a CISO, or as a business unit manager that I have a problem, that I have to do something, to accept that I have to invest into cybersecurity, accept that perhaps I have to slow down my operations, accept that I might delay a project, accept that finally this has a business impact. So really admitting for myself that I have an issue and that I have to act is not so the easy thing in life, in business life, we would like to do. And then the next step of reporting this intelligently to the executive board or to the board of directors or to the stock market is even the hardest step. That sometimes like confess. And what's happening then quite often is that the first reaction is, yeah, but it cannot be that bad, or the impact shouldn't be in this magnitude as we have shown. Go back and think about it again. But in this situation, it's important not to become weak, but to stick to this position, because I just admitted to it. I went through this very difficult process, admitting for myself that I have a problem, and stick to that one. And when that is achieved, we can take the tough decisions on strategies, on concepts, and on solutions and measures. So what I did as the last point on the understanding, looking for option, is now the basis to take the right decisions. And then finally, when the decisions are taken, certainly the consequence will be that business plans or even forecasts with respect to EBIT, sales, cash flow need to be adapted. Finally, it's important for an executive management team that this one is realigned in direction of cybersecurity. It's not anymore just a CIO issue. It's an integrated part of business management to take care on cybersecurity. And finally, this gives the basis to start and kick off a cybersecurity fitness program. So you see 3 steps to go through, and only when I have reached the end of this acceptance level, then I'm ready to consequently work on cybersecurity in an organization. And when working on cybersecurity, it helps to look on cybersecurity in context of a circle. Because cybersecurity and cyber threat and this whole process never ends. It starts with detection. So detecting possible cyber threats and prevent their impact. It goes then into response. So when the cyber threat and the cyber incident has happened, I have to react on that one, and finally I have to recover. And out of that, it's important to take lessons learned, to improve the systems, to establish respective prevention, and then being ready for the next incident to come. And that's going to be daily life, and that's also important why this is a management team issue and not only a CIO issue. And you see here, with all these buzzwords around it, there's competencies and activities which need to be established in an organization and which need to be worked out and permanently trained. We're talking about situational awareness, we're talking about business continuity planning, we're talking about the whole solutions for protection. It's important to establish a crisis management concept. It goes into detection monitoring, situational awareness technology, incident response. Finally, after that, forensic analysis, recovering, getting back in operation, and then finally, optimization. And in all these areas, it's on the one hand technology, certainly which needs to be in place. It's the related processes, organizations, and operations which need to be in place. And then, as core of it, and on a permanent basis, training, training, and training again. Now, when talking about cybersecurity training, I want to share with you an example of a scenario we train with customers at the RUAG cyber training range. And in the center of this scenario is a company we have called now F4C, and that's a global mechanical engineering and manufacturing company. They have said strategically, we're going into Industry 4.0. So that means they are doing a horizontal integration over the whole value chain. They're going into a networked production system, and they established a continuous engineering, so a direct real-time link in between engineering and manufacturing. So that's what we talk about on the Industry 4.0. And now what's happening, that ransomware encrypts one of their servers, one of the production servers, which contains the CA data, the CAD data for manufacturing. Now, a ransomware impact, that's an impact where a malware infects and encrypts data or a system, so makes it not accessible anymore for this customer, so they don't get to the CAD data anymore, and they ask for a payment to release that and to deliver an encryption key again to the customer. So that's ransom and a difficult situation. Now, we in the training range handle that in this way, that we have a team of executive management, of middle management, of IT experts, of legal experts, of software engineers who come to this training range. And they get confronted with this situation. And we distinguish 3 levels in such a training. We distinguish the leadership level, then the tactical and operational level, and the special operations level. On the leadership level, in the center, when these guys are getting confronted with this situation, is gathering the problem. So in this case, the problem is that we have this ransomware attack that had an impact on the production server, on which is the CAD data, and so the result is that the production line has a breakage and is out of operation. The result can be that this company cannot fulfill their service level agreements anymore, so they might get penalized by their customers, and there is also a risk that they will have soon an overfloatage of their stock. What this leadership team now also needs to do in this training camp, they have to execute now a number of urgent measures. So they have to organize themselves and put an emergency response team into operation. So an emergency response team under the lead of the CIO, the CISO goes in, there is a legal expert in, there is a communication expert in, and there is 3 software engineers in, which form this computer emergency response team. But what it needs then also is a first assessment of the situation, what has happened, where has it happened. It needs to work out the first communication plan. So if this information gets public, what are we going to do? And what they also have to establish as an initial measure is that they have to build up a reporting on a general level, but also on an emergency level on how they are going to handle this situation. So that's happening on this management level. On the tactical and operational level, usually then the experts have to work on a scope analysis of the affected system. So they go into the system and they realize that on the production server where some of the CAD data is stored, that this one is infected. They analyze the servers of the production line. They realize that one is in fact affected because it cannot operate, but in fact infected it is not yet. They also realize in this analysis that the malware, so the ransomware, came with a phishing mail to a CAD expert promoting a new CAD solution for free. So he clicked on it, and then he had the malware on his computer and finally on the server. And what they realize as well in the analysis is that there are connections in between the infected server, but also all the engineering servers and the all production servers. So a potential risk that the virus or the malware could switch over. What are they doing as well is increased monitoring of the infected system, but they also have to establish a monitoring on the gateways and the monitoring on the neighboring systems and servers of being ready to react because they don't know what's acting. And finally, they have to execute a number of special operation procedures, like, for example, isolating the data, preparing backups, going to a manual operation of certain procedures. That's common state of the art, usually IT experts are doing. And then on the special operations level, there they start their activities on increasing the threat intelligence. So they are looking into the environment of this company, whether there are other threats coming up into the scene, what's happening in the market, and really look into the details on what has happened and is currently happening. And they have to start identifying the hackers, understanding their motivation, and usually these special operations forces that are real cybersecurity experts who know how to handle such situations. And in training, it's now a different kind of training measures we apply. On the leadership level, it's like a command staff exercise, as those who are in military service are quite accustomed to do it. Usually, you start with targets of the exercise, then you're doing instruction of the people involved about the exercise and the theoretical background. But then finally, you have the people doing the training on a simulated environment. So we apply the customer-specific processes, procedures, but we're also doing a kind of virtual simulation on their man-machine interface and the systems they are working on. On this basis, they can train. All this is monitored. Quite often, we have white teams, so that are those guys who are, in fact, setting the scene and defining all the steps in this training. And finally, it's an after-action review to analyze on how it has happened. But it's also cyber crisis management role play we're doing in this field, which those who are quite familiar with crisis management know that in crisis management you get confronted with a highly frequent number of events, and you have to act on those. You have to set up the relevant communication channels. You have to deal with all your stakeholders and finally take decisions under highest pressure. That's part of the methodology here as well. It's facilitated discussions, but it's also tabletop scenarios that even on an electronic basis, different scenarios can be worked through. On the tactical and operational level, and that's specific in the approach we follow, that we simulate the real information technology and operation technology on the training servers. So they are working with a simulation of their real IT. They are working also with a simulation of their real data, and they are working with a simulation of their man-machine interfaces, and all activities the IT specialists take in the systems are monitored. Even each discussion is monitored, that this one can be later on used in the after-action interview and training discussion. We detect and use also very specific attacks for simulation, and the execution of the countermeasures is also done in this virtual arena. So people see, and the IT experts see in the system what they have done and what effect it has. And finally, what's important is decision-making for the IT experts can be done under stress. And on the special operational level, there a measure which goes in parallel is boot camps with experts. So researchers train the IT experts. They work on the real system. They work on the real system. They work on the real data. So that's the first training phase. The second training phase goes then very much into responding to the CID, to the CAD hostage. And in this field, it's again the 3 levels which play the scene. So doing assessment on the impact of options, what can be done on the tactical and operational level, they have to contain the incident on the one hand, but they have to recover then also in this environment for new operation. And on the special operations level, it's important that the hackers are deceived. So quite often the infected server is disconnected from the system, but it's connected to a honeynet. The honeynet is a net in which vulnerability is allowed, and that helps to see on the hackers attack and take conclusions to prevent in the future. And the third phase then finally goes into prevention. And in this case, usually after such an exercise, a very intensive after-action review is undertaken. In this example, the CEO of this company, F4C, took the decision that cybersecurity is a key subject for them, that the executive board will take responsibility in the future for cybersecurity, and they implement procedures for cybersecurity and invest into technology process, but also training. And with respect to training in cybersecurity is a proven case. As a representative of RUAG Defense, as a defense company, I have very much to do with military. In military, training is daily business. Military trains on all levels on a permanent basis. Sometimes they go to mission, take lessons learned, and then they train again, and training is a permanent process to show improvement. In the private sector, training is a one-time event. So what's important that this philosophy of a continuous training approach is applied also to private sector. Because real war in cyber is with the private sector. Their system get attacked on a permanent basis. And we as RUAG combine on the one hand this military philosophy. We're an leading expert in simulation. We understand the civilian needs of cybersecurity, and we have the respective technology competence. And when linking that together and spreading over the 3 levels, then training is the most effective investment to get cyber fit. So let me conclude. What's key at the very beginning when talking about cyber fitness is to get into the cyber mode by identifying, understanding, and finally accepting that there is a need for cybersecurity. And finally, it's training on the levels of leadership, tactical operation, and special forces or special operations on a permanent basis to make the organization and finally the CEO really fit for cyber. Thank you very much.